For thousands of years, every morning, for 365 days a year, the Jewish people have opened their prayers with a verse mentioned in this week's Torah portion. Matovu oholecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are the tents of Jacob, the dwelling places of Israel. It is this verse that when we enter the synagogue or even when we pray at home, this has been the entry point for prayer for thousands of years. Weekday, Shabbat, holiday, and Yom Kippur, this is the opening portal to our morning prayers. One would expect that this verse should reflect the grandiose aspiration of coming to God's abode. It should be something that has been handed down from Moses, from Abraham, perhaps even from the angels, as the section of the Baruch Shem of the Shema. But when we look closer, we find something astonishing. The author of this verse is none other than one of the worst rabid anti-Semites in history. A character none other by the name of Bilam, an advisor at one point to the emperor Pharaoh of Egypt, who was actually the architect behind the genocidal idea of casting all Jewish males into the Nile. And it is this same Bilam that now is being hired by the king of Moab, Balak, to curse the Jewish people. And as we know in the narrative of the Parsha, even though his intention was to castigate and give the most vile curses upon the Jewish people, they were transformed into the most beautiful prose and song and thoughtful prayers that we have incorporated into our daily prayers. But then one wonders why the opening verse to all of our prayers on every single day has to come from this vile individual. Why couldn't we find a more appropriate author for a verse to recite when we come into the synagogue? One of the profound interpretations of this verse comes from the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, who explains that, as we know, the Jewish people are referred to by two names, Jacob and Israel, Yaakov and Yisrael. And the verse Matovu reflects these two stages. There's Ohalecha Yaakov and there's Mishkenotecha Yisrael. They are the tents of Jacob, and then there are the dwelling places of Israel. Why the redundancy? Why can't the verse choose one or the other? If it's going to mention Israel being the more higher and aspirational idea of what the Jewish people are, as we know, the name Jacob represents the fact that Jacob was holding on to his brother's heel. Israel, Yisrael, was a name given to Jacob by an angel after he persevered over the angel after an entire night. Yisrael. Why do we have to mention Jacob, which represents a lower spiritual level of the Jewish people, holding on to a heel? The opposite extreme of Yisrael, which means bestowing upon the head mastery over angels. The Baal Shem Tov explains that the difference between Jacob and Israel mirrors the difference between an ohel and a mishkan. Ohel, a tent, is a temporary structure. Mishkan, coming from the word Shekhinah, represents the idea of permanent resting place of God, that God imbues His holiness upon the Jewish people and the edifice of the temple. And so he explains that, all religions, all peoples, all cultures have their holy days, have their holy spaces. The difference is that there is an abstract dichotomy between their holy days and holy spaces and the rest of their life. They go for a few hours on a weekend or on a particular day to a holy place, but when they walk out, they leave the holiness behind. The holiness is relegated to the space and the time of when they are worshiping. However, the Jewish people, he teaches, that every day we begin our day with prayer. Whether we pray in a synagogue or at home, we are entering God's tent, Ohalecha Yaakov. But not every single day is the same. There are days in our lives when we feel like we are Jacob, that we are struggling. We are on the level of a heel, and we are trying to play catch up all the time. And then there are days in our lives when we are like Israel, when we are reflective of the more higher aspirational idea of what it means to be a Jew. We feel like we are in the level of the angels, not just chasing and trying to keep up with the Esau's of the world. And therefore he teaches, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. A person may say to themselves, today I'm not in the mood to pray. Maybe Shabbat, maybe Yom Kippur, but every single day, why can't we be like everybody else that prays once a week, once a month, once a year? Why does God need us every single morning? And I'm not in the mood this morning. I can't muster up the energy every single day. The Baal Shem Tov teaches that there is the ohalecha Yaakov. There are the tents. The function of a tent is temporary. It's here today. It's meant to be taken apart tomorrow. The Jacob moments in our lives are ohel. They're temporary. We have to persevere to get to the point of Mishkanotecha Yisrael, the more permanent dwelling place, to feel the Shekhinah when we get to the level of Israel. But he says a person may think that I'll just wait until I feel inspired. I'm going to wait to feel elevated. I'm going to wait for the Yom Kippur, the Rosh Hashanah moments of my life. But it's a regular Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If I'm not feeling it, why do I have to force it? So he teaches the ohalecha Yaakov, what Bilam recognized, and why he blessed the Jewish people. He says, why can't we also, in the moments of uncertainty, in the moments of ambivalence in our lives, I wish that we could be similar to the Jewish people who every single day recognize that they have to affirm their connection to God. And sometimes it's only temporary. Sometimes it's only 5 minutes. Some days we're going to pray for an hour. It's going to be Mishkan. Some days it's going to be an Ohel. We're going to pray for a few moments. But those few moments that we're designating in the morning, every single day, even if it's temporary, and even if we're feeling like we're in a Jacob moment of our life, that is precious, that is holy. Now we understand why we begin this verse every day when we start prayer. Because no 2 days of prayer, no 2 days of connection are the same. So we enter the moment of our connection to God, we say, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. The first thing that's pleasing to God is the Jew who is like a Yaakov, who prays in a most temporary way, and he recognizes that he's still struggling, because he knows ultimately that God will lead him to the path of Mishkanotecha Yisrael. This, the Baal Shem Tov tells us, is that we should never feel down, we should never feel discouraged when we don't feel inspired, or we don't feel engaged in our prayer and our study, and we feel like, why are we doing it? It's meaningless. He says, no. The prayer that is chosen, that we start every single day, was precisely taken from this person, Bilam, because it teaches us that from the outside looking in, we realize how glorious it is that God gives us the opportunity to engage with him, not just on our good days, but also on our troubled days. And specifically on those days, we open up with Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, because when a Jew decides that he has so many other things to do, but the first thing he's going to do is engage with God, even if he's not feeling so inspired, that means more than all the Mishkanotecha of Yisrael, all the moments when we do feel inspired and we want to have that relationship. God says it's because of the moments that we push through and persevere, even when it's difficult. May God bless us that when we come into shul, or when we are in our homes and we are about to pray, we say, Matovu ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. We are reflective of this idea, and to feel that every single day is an opportunity. Whether the opportunity is a wholesome one or it's a complex one, there are opportunities. God gave us an ohel, he gave us a tent in the desert, and he gave us a permanent temple in Jerusalem. Both equally holy, both representing different journeys of our lives, needing to incorporate both of them. May God bless us that the permanent days of our lives, our wholesome moments, our inspired moments, should overwhelm those moments that we feel temporary and at the level of Jacob. Shabbat Shalom.